I'm multitasking. My apologies. We're just getting the PDF sorted so that we could include it for everybody in the chat. So without further ado, I will introduce our esteemed guest for the workshop today. Professor Carol Mutch has had a long and varied career in education across a range of institutions and countries, encompassing both practitioner and leadership roles in teaching, teacher education, policy advising, and academia. Her teaching focuses on educational policy and curriculum, research methods, and teacher education, and includes master's and doctoral level supervision. Her research and publishing spans two distinct but complementary areas: educational history, policy, pedagogy, and curriculum development, and education and research in traumatic and sensitive contexts. She has won numerous awards for her teaching, research, scholarship, and service to education. She currently holds the role of Education Commissioner for the National Commission for UNESCO New Zealand. I will also just preface this by letting everybody know that we will be recording this session so that it can be made available to folks who were unable to make it. We do encourage you to keep your videos on if you can, if your bandwidth allows, so that our guest feels more engaged with the audience. Any questions that you have, you can feel free to place those in the chat, and our team will monitor that throughout. And I will begin recording and turn it over to our colleague, Professor Mutch.
Kia ora, Ben. First of all, just a technical point. I started the recording just as you spoke.
Thank you, Carol.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Just a little bit of housekeeping. As Ben has said, we will put a link to a Google Docs or something where you can get a copy of all my slides. And the reason we're doing that is because I will give you some activities to work on. But before we get started, before I put up my slides and before that's available, I'm just going to randomly put you into some small groups to introduce yourselves to each other. Last time we met, we heard from everyone, and I think it took us half an hour to get through everyone. So as nice as it is to know who you are and where you're from and why you've joined us today, let's have you talking in smaller groups, and then that way we can move on with the content more quickly. So I'm just about to do that. So you'll just go into a random breakout room. I'll give you a couple of minutes to say who you are, where you're from, why you're interested in this, and make some new friends.
Hi everyone.
Kia ora. Are you not assigned to a room? Oh, let me see if I can assign you to. Have you been assigned a room? Just to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Ferial Ibrahim. I'm from Fiji. And since I'm an early researcher and also currently a PhD student, so this interactive workshop is great importance to me. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. And we have someone else who isn't in a room. So Paolo 1, do you want to introduce yourself? You, for some reason, don't seem to have entered a room. No, perhaps not. Yes, I'm sorry, Ferial. I had assigned everyone to a group to talk to each other, and for some reason, you don't seem to have been assigned to a group. Yet you don't come up as unassigned. So here we are. You have not joined. I wonder why that is. Well, how about I try moving you to another room and see if a message comes up for you.
Okay.
No? There you go. Great.
Yes. Now I was on the desktop, which didn't have a camera, so I just switched over to my laptop. Sorry.
That's okay. We're just waiting for all the groups to close. Right. I think it looks as if we might have everyone back. Well, welcome back, and I hope you had a chance to make some new friends and catch up with some old friends. As I say, I see a few familiar faces there, so nice to see you again. And I see that Ben has put the link to the Google Doc in the chat. So if you just want to click the chat button at the bottom, then you can see if you can get what we're going to be talking about. Meanwhile, I'm going to share my screen and get us started. Question from someone?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Oh.
I need to switch an account.
Oh, so Esther, yes, you just might.
It says I need to switch account when I click on it.
Okay, Ben, I may have to leave you to sort out the technicalities. People might have to request your permission to access that. But I think it's probably best we get going and we'll just play it by ear. Right, let me share my screen. I think we've got everyone in who has arrived, which is great. 35 participants, that's wonderful. Share my screen.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, so now I've struck a little problem in that I don't seem to be able to share my screen, but it says multiple participants can share. Just bear with me. There we go. Great.
Oh.
Don't look at my desktop. There's my PowerPoint opening up. Okay, we can relax a little bit now and just get ourselves started. So first of all, as you can see, we are OCEUS, Oceania Comparative and International Education, and the NERF group, which stands for New and Emerging Researchers Whānau. So I just want to greet you all. I may not have covered all the languages, but here are some anyway. So kia ora, kia orana, talofa lava, malo lele, I orana, whakalofa lahi atu, malo ni, bulavinaka, namaste, assalamu alaikum. Warm Pacific greetings to you all, and greetings in languages that you hold dear. And one of the languages that I hold dear is, of course, Te Reo Māori, being based in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So this just tells you who I am and where I'm from. Ko auraki te maunga, ko mawhera nui, awa, ko tohinga o mua te kāinga, ko tai potini te rohe, ko te waipunamu te motu, ko moana nui a kiwa te moana, ko Carol Mutch, tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. And that tells you that Mount Cook is my mountain, and or Aoraki, Aorangi, depending on your dialect. And there it is, a photograph I took last year between lockdowns. And it also says that I'm from the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand, a proud South Islander, but I also consider myself a person of the Pacific. So you now have know a little bit about me, but it's time for us to see what we're here for. So I've divided this into several parts, and I've got a kind of a cheeky yellow way of explaining what we're going to do, and then a serious white way of saying what we're going to do. So part one I've called making the best of what you've got, or in serious academic terms, how to get multiple publication from your data or findings. I'm just going to go through and give you a range of sort of, the people who know me will know I'm always talking about Auntie Carol's advice. And so from years of the work that I've been doing, you're going to get hopefully the best of Auntie Carol's advice. So let's have a look. All of this will be on those notes once you are able to get access to them. Do I have more people wanting to get in? Nope, that's fine. Oops, go back one. So what's sitting idle on your computer or in your research data? So you don't even have to have completed your entire PhD to get some writing done. And I think I know that some journals are unhappy with the size and scale of master's research, but I can't see why you can't find a practitioner journal, or you can't send it off to research notes in a bigger journal and so on, if you've got something really good to say. So if you've got a master sitting idle that you thought I could never publish from this, or my data is too old, it's all about the story that you tell and how you use what you've got. And if you have completed your PhD, if you're choosing not to turn it into a book, you should be able to get 5 articles out of it. So you really have to think carefully about how you're going to divide it up. Because of course, as I come back and say later, you can't do a lot of self-plagiarization. But let's think about your PhD. You've written, 80,000, 100,000 words. Surely you can chop that into sets of 5,000 to 7,000 words. In order to establish who you are and get kind of known for what's important, then you need to have one summary of your research in a really top journal, whatever is the top journal in your field, so that they've got a sense of the key issue you were investigating, that you know the literature, that you've got a strong theory or conceptual framework, that your methodology was sound, that you've got some amazing findings and you've got some implications. So that's kind of your prize piece. And that's the one you really should aim for, that top journal. And a top journal may turn you down, you may have to try several, but don't give up. And I'm going to come back to that later. Now then, you should think about your methodology, because usually when you've done a PhD, you have tried something new, or you've combined 2 methodologies, or you've used a methodology in a different field and so on. And so you've got lots of opportunities to provide people who just are coming along a few years behind you with the opportunity to learn from what you did. So what was that methodology? How did you adapt it? What were the issues that you faced? How did you solve those? Was it participatory research or emancipatory research or really creative qualitative research? Was it autoethnography? Was it a large-scale survey where you use some fancy tool? So go back and have a think about where you might be able to publish that, because there are qualitative research journals, there are quantitative research journals, there are mixed methods journals, there are narrative inquiry journals, there are all kinds of journals. So if you think and you write carefully, you should be able to get one there. And then, you've got several findings, you've at least got one big findings chapter. If you haven't got lots of findings chapters, you might have had 3 case studies, or you might have answered your research questions in different chapters, or you might have 3 themes or whatever that you're writing about. You can take one of those and you take some of the ideas from your number 1 article, which is, the summary of your methods and your theory and your literature and so on, but you just really expand on it. I mark a lot of PhD theses, and when I get to the findings, I go, oh, thank goodness. I've had all of that boring stuff, and now I've got the life, what I call it the beating heart of your thesis, a wonderful theme that comes alive with the voices of your participants, or a really in-depth piece of theorizing around some ideas and so on. So I always think that, yes, there's a chance for you to divide up your findings or your discussion or your implications and really expand on that. And then if you had an interesting use of theory, or you developed a conceptual framework that you tested, there are journals that love those sorts of things as well. And the 5th one I suggest is research never goes as you had planned. For those of you who might have been researching in COVID-19, right, there's an article. What was it like when you suddenly found you couldn't go into the field? And you're having to try and talk to people online. What were the ethical issues you faced? What were the practical issues you faced? How did you mitigate those? We all need to learn from these things. So as you can see, the kind of thing I'm getting you to think about is, don't just think 1 PhD, 1 article, moving on, got to do another big study before I've got something to say. You've got lots of things to say. And then the next one is, how many times have you gone to a conference and you presented a really interesting idea, but you never got around to writing up that conference paper? Oh yes, I can see some smiles from the people who are down the side of my screen. So I'm guilty of that too. In fact, a paper that I use all the time in my classes never got published. You know, I kind of wrote it up and never sent it off, but I'm still using it in my classes because it was such a good idea, and I did it really well. But yes, there's something. And that's an easy one to tick off because you've already done the thinking, you've put it in a logical order, you've presented it to an audience, you've got some feedback, just do it. Another way to think about it is when you do your PhD, you're in a time frame. You know, you've got 3, 4, depending on whether you're part-time or full-time and so on. You just got to get it out there. Your supervisors will have said, stop, just finish it, do it, get it in. But you've got this wonderful, rich data that you'd love to go back and look at. Or maybe the analytic frame you chose wasn't the right one. Maybe you could try looking at through another theory. One of my doctoral students who's recently finished, it took her a while to really get to grips with what she'd done because she'd gathered her data and then taken a break from her work, and then sort of says, oh, my data's too old and there weren't enough. I meant to go back to that school and I never did. But she managed to take the same set of data and look at it using, so she did a thesis with publications. So 5 different articles, exactly the same data, but she looked at it through different lenses. If I look at it this way, it shines a light on this way. If I look at it that way, I see different things. If I investigate it in this way. So she was able to actually, with a relatively, I mean, she interviewed, I've forgotten how many teachers, twice about her particular topic, and went back twice. So she didn't have lots of data, but she made really, really rich use of it. And she got wonderful feedback from her examiners, where they really thought the way that she had used those different theoretical frameworks made it so interesting. And then the last one is, could you combine data or aspects of your study with others? So I've written an article with someone from the National University of Samoa, where we were both looking at the use of arts post-disaster. So she's already got publications on that. I've already got publications on that, but by putting it together, we were able to do a comparative piece of post the 2009 tsunami in Samoa and post the 2010-2011 earthquakes in Christchurch. But our focus was new because we were looking at the different ways in which we had used arts-based methodologies in different contexts. But yep, there's another article. So the 3 little asterisks at the bottom mean you now need to turn off your, oh, you don't have to turn off your visuals, but at least turn off your sound and just take a minute to think about one of those. Pick one of those and write it down and jot a few notes and commit to doing something that's off there. A conference paper, a reanalysis, something from your thesis that you hadn't thought about. Okay, so make sure to turn your sound off. I'll give you a minute and then I'll be back. So you should be thinking or writing. Okay, that's your minute up. So you found something there that's useful. I'm going to name somebody, and he probably knows it's coming. So Igya, I want you to turn your mute off and tell us one of the things that you are going to write from your PhD.
you so much, Carol. So, yes, hi everyone. That's one thing I just being struggling with writing the things also, but I'm very much keen to write a very relevant sort of work that's been from my PhD. So it is more about giving an idea about overview about my work. So disaster risk reduction education theory to practice, a case study from Nepal. So it will be providing an opportunity to the reader to know about the overview of my work. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being brave enough to be put on the spot. So I hope if I had the time to go around everybody else, you'd be able to also articulate something that you're going to make sure you do. Now, when I move to the next slide, you'll see that I'm giving you Auntie Carol's rules. So rule number 1 that we've just discussed is don't waste your hard work. You've worked really hard to get where you are. So think, I mean, I do this as well, as I've already told you. There are some rules about what you have to be careful about, but you've done so much work. You can focus it for different journals and so on. There's lots of things you can already do without thinking you have to win a big grant and do a whole lot of new work. Make the best of what you've got, especially in these COVID-19 times when you might not be able to travel or do the things that you want to do. So here's an example with me. So many of you know that I've been doing this post-disaster research. So I worked over a couple of years with 5 schools post-disaster in Christchurch, post the earthquakes. And I came out with these different themes about principals as crisis managers and teachers as first responders and students as active citizens and communities, schools as community hubs. And what I've shown you in my diagram there is that I've written 2 pieces about principles. So in one case, the black, I think you can see it in colour. So school A, B and D contributed to one article. And then in another article, I used all the principles so one was just about the principal stories. And then the next one, the red one, was about the idea of crisis managers. Look, I did the same with teachers. Individual teacher stories from schools A, B and D, and then teachers as first responders using all my examples. So what you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 articles or book chapters from one research project across 5 schools. Written for different journals, written for different audiences, sometimes using a different theory, sometimes having to read a different set of literature. So if we take principals as crisis managers, I knew nothing about the crisis leadership literature. So I did have to go and read a whole lot of new literature. So the story I was telling was fresh and new. But look how many ways I sliced that cake. And so that's one of the things I want you to try after we've finished here. But here are the rules. You need to rewrite it. You can't just cut and paste it. One of the reasons being that it's not ethical, but that many journals use a plagiarism software. So if you had published a piece and then you cut and paste it into another piece, it could be picked up by them. So you can use some of the same ideas. I find I have to kind of rewrite my introductory part to kind of tailor it for that audience. I have to redo my literature review, add in some maybe more newer references or jig the way that I've done it. So you do need to tailor it for each outlet. And you do need to think about who your audience is. In some cases, so if it goes in a leadership journal, I'm writing for leaders, I'm writing for principals. If it goes into one that went into a community journal in the United States, was for the idea of schools as communities was for parents as well as for schools. So it had to be written in a completely different way because while it had to be a bit theoretical, it was for parents and so on who may not understand education jargon. So I had to tailor it to a different journal style and think about my audience. I've already mentioned that you might need to read some new literature. Well, that's great because it gives you a focus for learning some new stuff. for actually going, wow, crisis leadership. I didn't know it existed, but now I've got a good sense of it, and it's an idea I can carry with me into other writing. It might be that your theory, you know, you use Bourdieu or whoever it was to look at what you had done, and you might think, no, you know, I've always wanted to try something else. It might be that your methods chapter wasn't your strongest chapter and you've done a bit more reading and you want to strengthen that. Or it might be your literature's out of date and you need to do whatever's been published in your topic in the last couple of years. And the other thing you need to be careful about is that when people might read, say, for example, both my leadership ones, I do use some of the same quotes, but I try to pick different examples so that the articles are still nice and fresh. So you might want to do that as well. And for those of you who are trying hard to get yourselves published and you send things off to journals and either you're waiting 2 or 3 years to get it published or it gets rejected. Yep, I see smiles again there. One of the best ways is to look for special issues. So go to the journals that you often publish in or that you've read and look to see if they have a special issue. Because when you apply for a special issue, often you might only have to submit your, a short summary or an abstract. And then they go, yep, thanks, we'll take it. And then if your article's good enough, it will be published. So you don't have to go through, you still have, once it's finished, it will still be peer reviewed, but it is a little bit easier because if the editor likes your piece, and I know there's some OCS NERFs out there who sent a piece into a special issue that I'm editing, and so I want that to go in. It's a good piece. I need to know that it's going to go in, and I've got other pieces that have come to me as the editor and I've gone, wow, Guatemala, that's really cool, or internal refugees in China. I've never heard of that in terms of COVID-19. So the editor has much more say over making sure that if they really like your piece, it's going to turn up. Whereas if you submit it to A+ journal, they've already got a waiting list of hundreds of articles that they're dealing with and so on. You kind of get lost in the way. So that's a really good way for you to sort of get your work out there. That has to be relevant. So some people sent me in articles for this special issue on pedagogy of love and care in the time of COVID-19. I got sent articles that had nothing to do with COVID-19 or that had nothing to do with schools or young people or children in COVID-19. They were about hospitals. So yeah, sometimes people don't actually read the call. You're better if you could meet the call. And once you've got one piece written, and I know that some of you will have heard this before, you take a quick time to stop and celebrate, but you've got to keep it going. So here is a diagram that some of you will have seen before. And this is based on you writing with material that you already have, not going out and getting new material. So you get a new idea. You find an outlet. I always think if you know who you're writing for, it gives you a real focus. Who's the audience for this journal? What kind of articles do they publish? What sort of voice does it have? What referencing convention do they use? New idea, find an outlet. Tidy up your literature or methodology or theory or whatever needs to be upgraded. First draft, share it with your critical friends, present it at a conference, revise it, submit it, send it in. If it has to come back and be revised, fine. But when you're halfway through that process, you should be working on the next idea, and round and round and round you go. And as I've told NERF people before, you should have 5 pieces on the go at any one time. One you're thinking about, one that you're a little bit further along, you might have done some research for, one that you're analysing, one that you're getting in a good state, and one that you've submitted. As soon as the submitted ones, you push the submit button, bang, back to new idea. And so you just keep them going. Now, some will get published quickly, some will take longer. But I know for some of you that sometimes your jobs depend on you having 2 pieces published each year. Well, you're not going to have 2 pieces published each year if you don't have 5 in the pipeline, because some will take so long. And yes, we know that, you know, you may get rejections, but I'll come and talk about that later. So that was all part 1. So that part 1 was about using what you have. Remember, don't waste your hard work. So part 2, getting your thinking straight. That's Auntie Carol's words, or in academic speak, how to write concise and useful abstracts and summaries. Okay. Some people will have met my what's the problem before, especially if they've been one of my doctoral students. I think this is such a useful way for ensuring that people know what it is that you're talking about and why your research matters. So when people come to me to be supervised by me, the first thing I send them away to do is answer these questions. What is the problem, issue, and compelling question that you're addressing? What is your focus? And that helps them, especially if it's a bit woolly or it's too complex, narrow it down to something that's manageable in the time frame that's really focused. And then the next question is, well, why? Why is this significant? Why would you invest, in the case of a doctorate, 3, 4, 5, 6 years? It's got to be really important. And then the next one, and why do you need to do it now? What's the argument you are making that if we don't address climate change or whatever your interest might be, you know, the world won't be such a good place? So it helps you sell your story. And why is it a problem that's relevant to the particular time and place that is the setting for your work, the country that you live in, or where you want to do your field work, or whatever it may be? And then the next question is, how have others attempted to resolve this problem? The point of having a literature review is that you are showing your editor, your examiner, whoever it may be, that you know the literature. And yet there's a gap in the literature that you are trying to address. So you have to show, well, other people have tried to address this question in these ways, they have these findings, but they've never asked this particular question or applied it at this age level or in this setting or whatever. So you can show that you are stepping on the shoulders of giants, but that you've got something new to add. You're telling us what the gap is. And then how have others attempted to explain this problem? I often see that people do literature reviews and all they look for is the findings. But you should also be looking for the kinds of theories that they use to explain their research. That way you build up a nice little bank of other theories that you might call on at another time. When you've gone back to relook at your work and going, oh, I remember reading, somebody analysed it in this way and explained it in this way. I can go back and read up on that theory. So keep your eye out for the different theories they use. And other people will engage in different ways in terms of methodology. So when you're putting your what's the problem together, you need to be able to show how your methodology either builds on what other people have done before or provides some area of comparison. You know, people usually investigate this particular issue in these ways, but what I'm adding is this. And if this is early on in your thinking, then how do you think you might explain it? So that theory might be different to how others have explained it. It might be something that you want to try. It might be something that you eventually do come up with, but it helps to think about that early on, and you might change your mind, but see how this is really, really shaping your thinking. What might you expect to discover? So what might your potential outcomes be? Or if you're a quantitative researcher, what is your hypothesis? And at the end of it, what do you think you will have contributed to our wider understanding of the problem? Now, I just marked a thesis, well, I won't name the country, but this person was investigating the ability for young people to have a say in decision making about things in their particular country. And when I marked it, it was all about, and that will make a difference to this city and this country and this city and this country. And it was like, no, 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 lift it up. What can we learn about the issue that you were dealing with in your city, in your country, that will help the rest of us think about bigger ideas? And so that's what you need to do. Now, if you've finished whatever you're doing, your research is finished, your thesis is finished and so on, but you're thinking about writing a book or a book chapter or sending something to a journal, go back to this. What's the problem? You're just going to put it in the past. What was the problem you were addressing? Why was it a problem worth investing your time in? Why is it a problem that needs addressing? And so on. You just turn all of that into the past, and then it just focuses you down so that you're not trying to tell your entire thesis in a short space of time. Okay. Now you're going to have a little bit of a go at that in a moment. You can see here that some of the things I've just said in the previous slide. Use the what's the problem to be clear about what you have to say. Use it for designing a study, designing an article, or even designing a media piece. I always think, and I will say later on in these slides, that, get yourself known. Write a little piece for a community newspaper, a national opinion piece, a practitioner journal, teacher union journal, and so on, whatever it is. Practice getting to write your ideas and tailoring it to an audience, and use that for pitching a chapter or an article. So if you just want to approach an editor, say, I'm thinking about this article, would it suit your journal? There's a nice framework for you to use. And for those of you who are applying for funding, that will also be really good for that introductory piece when you have to write the summary of why your research is really important and needs to be done now. Use the what's the problem. And you can use it for short pieces, or you can use it for longer pieces. And as I say, if you're preparing a new study, that will help you there as well. Just be flexible. You don't have to go through everything as I have outlined it there, but it will help you to think. So we have 3 little asterisks, time for me to stop talking and for you to start doing. Now, I see that some people might be putting messages in the chat, but while I've got screen share, I'm not able to see the chat. So I may have to come back and deal with your questions later on. But for now, you have 3 little asterisks, and that is to go back to this and think about a problem that you might be interested in, and just do a few of those. So what's your problem? Why is it worth investing time in? Why is it urgent? Why is it relevant? Just answer a couple of those. And if you're thinking about going forward with those, then think about it in the past. So either for preparing to do something or preparing to write about something you've already done. Okay, so time for you to take a minute to think about a way in which that might be useful to you. Okay, your minute is up, but at least if you haven't been able to use the link that's in the chat, then we'll make sure that we make this available to you later so that you've got it there. But we're going to move on. Rule number 2 is one of the reasons that I give you what's the problem is because you need to give editors, examiners, reviewers what they want. Sometimes I get things to read where it's about what that person wants to say, and they include all this amazing detail and so on, but I'm left with my head absolutely swimming because I need to make a judgment about something. Is this good enough to go in an article? Is this worth being funded? So rule number 2 is give them what they want. So here's an using the same idea that we just looked at, but getting you to stretch a little bit further. So not only have I given you focus, significance, urgency, and the questions that you're now used to and had a little bit of a think about, I'm giving you some sentence starters so that you can be much more focused and tight. What I find is I get a whole lot of woolly stuff and I get to the bottom and finally I go, oh, that's what this article is about, because I've got all this background and information and so on. But one of the things that this helps you do is it helps you put right up front what it's about. I know it sounds boring and you can fluff this up once you've had a practice at it, but I need to know this article sets out to do what? To explain, explore, examine, present the results of, not, you know, well, it's nice to have an introductory sentence like, you know, in this time of complex change, etc. But if I read more than 1 or 2 sentences about that introduction, you've lost my interest already. I need to know, what am I going to spend my time reading? And if you could tell me that I'm setting out to do this and it's important for these reasons and it affects these people, and while it was just a small scale study done in this place, it will be of interest too, or you've got me much more interested. You're telling me what I need to know. And again, all these things are important for funding as well as for writing an abstract for something. Right. Now that again will be in the notes that you get. So we've just got someone new, I'll let them in. So that will be in the notes that you get, and you can just have a practice at that. And of course you don't want it to sound too pedantic, but if that's what you tell me in your abstract, you're more likely for me to be interested in what you've got to say, rather than me searching for the big ideas. I want to know, what's it about? What did you do? Where did you do it? What did you find? Why does that matter? And so often I'm really searching for those sorts of things. Okay. Now, if you're applying to a special issue of a journal or answering a chapter call, number 3 is, if they give you a structure, use it. So I'm going to give you an example of that now. So this is a genuine call where the topic was qualitative research for diverse and underserved communities. Look, they told you what you needed to know. They wanted to know about the context, the focus, the sample, the setting, the methodology, the process. That's all there. If you did not answer each of those headings, then you were not going to get past the first hurdle. They needed to know the answer to those. And you can see that, for example, in this particular case, that qualitative research for diverse and underserved communities, about halfway down, you'll see the process or protocol for the inquiry, the information processing and analysis, the anticipated and unanticipated outcomes. They were really keen on the how of what you did, because they said later, brief summary of the findings. They weren't interested in your findings. They wanted to know how you use qualitative research. So there are many more headings about what you did and what others could learn from that. So it's a matter of not saying what you want to say, but seeing what it is that they need to know. So as you can see, there are 3 little stars or 3 little asterisks. I've taken that particular one, but it may be that you want to think about either qualitative research for underserved communities, or you might want to think about something that you're writing, where again, you've got a set of headings, use them. What's your focus? Who was it about? Where did it take place? How did you do it? How did you analyse it? What challenges happened along the way? And what does this add to our knowledge? So again, you've got another minute or so to think about something you're working on and imagine that you think it fits that particular call. Okay, so, and your minute starts now. Off you go. And again, that's your minute up, but again, these will be in the notes, and it will just get you used to thinking about a shape of a piece, because once you've got a sense of the shape of the piece, it's so much easier to write. So we'll move on. Rule number 4, make it easy for them, whether they are editors, reviewers, funding committees, whoever, to find what they want. And so you can see I'm moving you all along the way to making it easier. So because if it's easy for them to find their way around, if you give them what they want, you're more likely to be published. Doesn't matter how amazing your findings were, if you don't package it properly, then no one's going to take it. So I've just slipped in here one about a funding application, and this is one that I put in for those of you who know the New Zealand system for a Marsden. And the point I'm trying to show here is that when you sit on a funding committee, there'll be a set of questions that you will have told your researchers to answer, and then you will have some kind of framework, and you'll just be looking at this. So have they clearly outlined what their research aim is? Is their overarching research question clear and coherent? Does the research question match the research aim? And from this particular fund, I can't remember whether this was a Marsden or another one, what makes this research novel and original? So not only am I answering their questions, but I'm answering it in a way that I want it to attract their attention. So do you see my use of italics? So the first one is, if they get nothing else off this page, I want them to understand that it's about this idea of community anchoredness and the fact that we need to explore this. So you see in my overarching research question, I've brought back the idea of community anchoredness or community anchors in italics. When they get to the bottom of this page, they will have no concern about what is the focus of my research application, my funding application, because I keep telling in just slightly different ways and slightly different words. But if everything is so woolly, when they get to the end, they're just going to go, now what was that about? And you see in the case of the last question I've given you, what makes this research novel and original? That was one of, in the funding criteria, it said this research needs to show that it's novel and original. So what did I do? I turned that into a question, and then I gave it a very short answer in italics to attract their attention, and then I explained it. So again, if you're thinking about responding to something, make it easy for them to find what they want. So rather than buried in a big thick paragraph somewhere about and this research makes an original, you know, contribution to whatever, I go bang, I turn their criteria into a question. I give them between the eyes. This is the first research to examine community anchoredness as a useful integrative concept. I took a bit of a risk with that, but I couldn't find that anyone had ever done it anywhere else in the world, so I felt brave enough to save that. And then I explain what it is. New and innovative idea that needs critical examination. So by that, they must have been sick of community anchoredness by the time they got to the end of it. But it was, because I sit on these committees, the point I was making is make it easy for them to find what they want, so that they're not searching through. So if it's a chapter call and they want you, that they haven't given you a format, but they want you to talk about things, just use bullet points, use headings, make it easy for them to find what they want. If you just write something, as I say, that's kind of all over the place and woolly, they'll just go, oh, don't even know what that one's about. No, we've got far better applications than that one, so we'll just put that one aside. Okay, that's part 2. Part 3. I haven't even got you writing yet. I've only got you thinking. See how much time I'm getting you to think about thinking and framing and shaping before you even put fingers to keyboards or, you know, pencil to paper. So I want you to think about good pre-writing habits, or how to plan so that you're not constantly rewriting and revisiting. And believe me, I see, being a supervisor, you must imagine how many multiple versions of things that I see. And sometimes I just want to shake people and say, you know, if you just thought about it before you wrote it, and you had a structure and you answered the questions or you used the guidelines I gave you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Right. And again, this may be something that others of you have heard me say. Plan before you start. I'm sure that there'll be people here today who rewrite their first paragraph at least 30 times, over and over and over and over again. Wow, imagine if instead of writing your first paragraph 30 times, you wrote 30 paragraphs. You can do that if you have a plan. So have a plan. And I always plan around the length of the piece. If it's 3,000 words, then I divide my thinking and my word allocation up into the right number of sections. If it's 6,000 words, then I know I've got more space perhaps for expanding the literature review or putting in a bit more of the findings or going into more detail on the discussion, whatever it may be. And then, and I'll show you a diagram of this in a moment, then I write in sections according to my plan. So if I've decided that my literature review will be 350 words because it's a small piece, that's what I write. So that means that I read it and I might do a draft version and I trim it down and I trim it down and I group and I make it. I don't start with my literature review and 5 pages later I've still got a literature review. I do all the planning ahead of time. It makes your writing so much easier. And I get to know how much I can write in a certain chunk of time. So I know how much I can do in a week, and that includes having a busy life, but I know where I can block time and those sorts of things. So I know what I can do. So I could say, oh, right, I've got that article due. I haven't quite finished. Right, I know that I can sit down. I've got an hour I can squeeze in there. I don't have to go to that silly university meeting there. That gives me another 2 hours. And I know how much I can write in that. So get to know your rhythms, how much you can write. And the next one, and I'd also put in there, block it out in your diary. So put a sign on your door. For those of you working from home, well, just tell the family that, you know, when the door's shut and you've got the grumpy face on your door, they have to go away and sort their own problems. Whatever you do, protect that time. But Don't agonize over every word. Just write. So write in a descriptive way to begin with. And so sometimes I'll just go blah, 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 blah. And then I've got the sense of what I want to say. Then I can go back and go, no, if I just get rid of that, yeah, I'll keep that bit. That's good. Right, moving on to the next bit. Rather than, as I say, agonizing over and over, I make very quick decisions. And then I stick to the plan. So why would I change it? Because I don't have enough time in my life to keep going, oh, no, maybe I should do this here. Oh, no, maybe I could. Oh, I've just read this amazing article. I'm going to change this. Oh, I heard about this theory in a conference. Oh, no, do that next time. Okay? So when you've got your plan, pin it up so you don't go down rabbit holes. If you look up there and it says that you can only write 500 words for your introduction, that's all you can write. Write your 500 words. If you're going over that, go back and trim. And my suggestion is don't revisit the sections or try and revise the whole piece you've just done until you've got a bigger sense of what you're doing. Truly, I see people rewrite that introduction 1,000 times. And as I say, if you just think, well, 1,000, slight exaggeration, but many times, maybe 10 times, you could have done 10 times as much. I can see the people laughing. So I know that there's a few of you out there who do that. Write it once. If it doesn't work, just you've got a framework at least. Just keep writing the next piece and the next piece. And when you've got enough, you get a sense of, actually, it's kind of gone off a slightly different direction. Do I stay with that? Or do I go, no, Carol, you can't go down that rabbit hole. Nobody's interested in that. Throw that bit out and just carry on with your plan. Just gives you a much better sense of control. So if you do that, you make it easy for yourself. So rule number 5, make it easy for yourself. Let's have a look. So here's a plan, and this is a plan that I did with a couple of people working on my research team, plus 3 teachers from a school, and we were writing a collaborative article. So you can see we were responding to a call for something, so we did have a bit of a framework, but we went, okay, introduction, this is what we're going to say. CM, Carol, you do that bit. Context, background, Carol, you do that bit. Literature review, Marta and Maria, you've got that for theme 1, and so on. You can see it all got divided up. And then if you look down, finding case studies 1, 2, and 3, they were our 3 teachers. So Shannon, who's SN, just had to write 500 words. And Amanda, who's case study 2, 500 words. And Bronwyn, who's case study 3, 500 words. Everybody did their bit, and then we put it all together, and it was the job of CM and ME, who are myself and Marta Estes. We then just smoothed it all out. Everybody done their bits, we smoothed it all out. Rather than people agonising over in bits and pieces, we're more experienced writers, we could just shape it up and make it ready to go. But by doing that and saying, okay, and I'll show in a moment how we might do the numbering thing, but we're just able to say, go away, write 500 words, bring it back. That's your bit, don't worry about where it's going to fit, we'll make it fit. So when you work in a team, 2 important things are, 1, once you've made your decisions about who's doing what, and if it matters, what order you're giving, authorship and so on, then just go away and do it, bring it back together. But you need 1 or 2 people who smooth it so that it's got a really nice flow. It feels like the same voice, or they're explaining why you might be going into a slightly different voice and so on, so that it hangs together. But if you've done all the planning ahead of time and you've sat down and you've had your discussions about, what's the point you want to make and what are people's different strengths and so on, I put this together on a whiteboard. We each take a picture with our phones and off we go and do our bit and come back together again. Keep pushing the wrong button. So if you were responding to that book chapter call or anything else that you're interested in, this is what I do. And if I'm just going to move on one for now, I still do this. Even as experienced as I am with, 100 or more publications, I still sit down and draw myself little boxes And you can see there, I'm thinking and I'm planning how many words, how many sections, and then this is a book proposal, you know, how many sections in each chapter, etc. In that case, each square is a whole chapter. Sometimes it's just a section, but let's go back. So I've written a plan as if it was for the qualitative research for underserved communities. And see, I've given things a number. So when you're reading those articles that you're reading for your literature review, have a look at the journal. How long are their literature reviews usually? How long do they expect the findings part to be? How long do they expect the discussion to be? So here I'm using the framework that they gave us way back, because why would I spend a lot of time inventing a new framework when they've given me one? Introduction, context, focus, case, setting, methodology, process, analysis, challenges, changes, findings, learnings. And I go, nah, 250 words, introduction, tick, that's enough. Want to spend a bit more time on how I picked the sample or the place in which it happened and so on. And then towards the end, because that book chapter was about the use of qualitative research, I'm incorporating my findings into how the findings using that qualitative methodology helped me get to those findings and what we can learn from that. So I'm spending a bit more time down that end. But look, all adds up to 5,000 words. It was a 5,000 word book chapter. And then one day I can go, you know, I got an hour. Oh, I haven't written the process. I've got an hour. I only have to write 250 words. Think about it, make some bullet points, flick through my notes and so on and go sit down, write my 250 words, a bit more than a paragraph, nearly a page, but it's done. And then I find myself another hour sometime and I can write about the analysis. Challenges and changes might take me a morning, but I've blocked out that morning in my diary. So plan, 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 plan. So I think we did have 3 little things. What I want you to think about now for your next minute is something that you're working on or thinking about, and draw yourself, or because you probably haven't got time to go to a fancy chart, a couple of boxes and think about, what is it I'm writing? What might I put in the introduction? How many words do I think that might be? And just get used to thinking about chunking it up, because that makes your life easier. So off you go for your next minute, thinking about chunking a piece that you're writing. Right, that's your minute up. And as I said earlier, when I'm working with multiple authors or with my research team and so on, we do this up on the whiteboard. We actually draw the boxes up on the whiteboard and think about who's going to do what and how many words it might need. Right, we have a new person, admit them. You've seen my scribble start for a book. Part 4, getting your ideas sorted, or how to write with clarity and structure. See, we've done part 1, 2, 3. We're only now up to actually doing some writing. So what are my tips for writing? Not location, 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 but structure, structure, structure. What are you trying to say? I read so many pieces where I'm baffled. They start with this and then they go off here and then they go over there and they come back here, and it's like, what are you trying to say? What is your argument? And you always know what your argument is if you can fill out that sentence. I will argue that. What's a piece I read recently was that there's a balance between the impact of home life and school life on young people's cultural and linguistic understanding of the world. I don't know. Somebody must have sent me a piece to read, and I think that was the main thought. But they could argue that, whatever it was. In fact, they didn't argue it, and I had to write back and say, what's the argument you're making here? Perhaps you could say this and this and this. But yeah, if you can say, I will argue that, even if it's not in your piece, but you're really clear in your head what you are arguing, then that is going to make your piece so much easier. And then you have to show what evidence is supporting that argument. Is it your findings? Is it the literature? Is it your framework? What is the thing that is helping you support your argument? And that's what the next one says. Where does the evidence come from? Where did your argument come from? What proof do you have that your argument will hold water? And then you think about, what does your reader need to know? So often you write all of that, what does your reader need to know stuff at the start, without actually being clear about your argument, and then going, well, actually, they don't need to know all that history stuff. I can reduce that down to a couple of sentences. Yeah, and they don't need to know all that political stuff, because really for the argument I'm making in this piece, that's not so relevant. So by having a focus, you're going to be able to put that structure together. It will be easier. And then if I was going to read your article, what would it look like? Would it be themes, cases, vignettes, graphs, tables, examples, scenarios? What are you using? How are you showing me your evidence? And how are you going to signpost it for me? In other words, what kind of order is it going to go in? Normally articles follow a certain order, but sometimes you shift that around because you may not want to introduce your theory till later. It might not be at the start. And then how are you going to draw me in? Well, hopefully you'll draw me in because you'll do the what's the problem? What's the problem? Why is it urgent? Why is it significant? And then you'll be able to present your data. And then think about how you smooth it all out so it has this nice coherent thread all the way through. Structure, structure, structure. Because we get to rule number 6. I've got one more rule to go after this. Make it easy for your reader. The pieces you write actually are not for you. They might look nice on your CV, they might get you a promotion or enable you to keep your job, but really once you become a writer, then it's about your reader. They are far more important. So if you haven't met City, Suburb, Street before, I drum this one into my undergraduate students when they're writing their essays or when they're writing their exam questions. There's a city. Cities are made up of suburbs. Suburbs are made up of streets. Through whatever piece you're writing, I should be able to see a structure. That the city is your argument. It's your big idea. If it's just a paragraph or a section, it's the theme. It's the thing that holds it together. And then each big idea will have a suburb. That's your internal structure. If it's a whole piece, it might be your sections. If it's part of a piece, it might be the key ideas just in that theme. And then you have streets. The streets are your evidence. So if you're in your city, you're making a claim, but you're saying that there are 2 main ways in which this happens, then your streets provide the evidence for those 2 main ways. Or the statistics from the literature, or the data from your research, or the examples from your case study. But if you think about the big, the whole, and how that breaks down, and then how each of those parts provides you then with evidence, we've got a structure. You might not write it like that, but again, it's a really helpful tool for planning it out. And as you see, there is 3 little asterisks. So you get a minute to think about something you're thinking about. What's the big idea? What are some sub-ideas? And what are the pieces of evidence that you are going to present to support those? And your minute starts now. Right, and that's the end of your minute. But again, just another useful tool for you. And look, even for those of you who might be working in, you know, heads of school or management positions and so on, when you have to write a position paper or present an argument to the dean, use city, suburb, street. Here's my argument, here are the key points I want to make, and here is the evidence that supports it. It just is so simple. Right, the other really easy thing to do, but that makes such a difference to your reader, is about state and expand. So the whole point about academic writing is you set it out up front. It's not a piece of journalism where we've got to wait to the end of your piece to see whether Meghan and Harry are going to go to Prince Philip's funeral or not. We need to know that in the first line, or certainly in the first section, and then you build up your argument. So the idea about state and expand is that your whole piece should have a big argument that then is broken into smaller parts, which is the point of the activity we've just done. But if it's just a paragraph, it should have a gritty opening statement that tells me what's coming up now. So for those of you being English teachers, you have taught your secondary students to do a topic sentence. Why you don't do it in your own writing, I don't know, but you seem to forget once you get to academia. So I invented this paragraph, but you get the idea. Educational leadership is a contested field with multiple definitions. Already I know what this paragraph is going to be about. So Sparrow has identified up to 76 definitions. Sparrow 2020. But in a recent review of the literature, however, Parrot and Pigeon 2019 claim that all definitions fall into 3 categories. Definitions that focus, I made this stuff up, but never mind. You're getting the idea. See the structure? Big idea, an explanation of that the contested nature of it, but then I'm breaking it down into structure. Parrot and Pigeon, very luckily for me, found that there were 3 different ways in which these definitions fell. And then I'm really smart because someone gave me a structure and I'm going to use it. In this section, I will use each of Parrot and Pigeon's categories in turn to discuss the relevant literature in the context of crisis leadership. See all those things I've been talking about? Structure, if someone gives you a structure, use it. A big idea with smaller subheadings. All of that is in that paragraph there. So what did I decide you had to do? Now it's coming up to 4:30, and I do know that the session was advertised to go for an hour and a half. I'm happy to carry on, but I do understand if some people have to get away because they'd only put this amount of time. But you can access the recording, and I see by having a quick look at the chat, seems to be that you're able to access the notes as well. But I'll just carry on as if people aren't leaving yet, and hopefully those of you who are able to stay can keep on having a go. So in this case, I want you to think about a claim that you've made in your research or that you want to make, and then think about how you're going to use structure within a paragraph. So how might you make a claim like leadership is a contested issue and how might you break it down. So it helps if you know your findings or you know the literature, see if you can frame the opening of a paragraph, give 3 ideas or however many, and then pull it. We won't have time for pulling it to a close, but I think make a claim and then think about how you would substantiate that claim with 3 pieces of evidence. Okay, and your minute starts now. Okay, and that's that minute. So we're nearly there. Part 5, getting your writing sorted. So you've now got a structure, you're starting to write pieces, you've put them in your boxes or your shape and you pinned it up on your wall and you've booked it out in your diary. You're thinking about the internal structure and how to engage the reader and make them able to follow it. So I just wanted to have you thinking about using a tone in academic writing that is not so boring and hard to follow. Now, one of the things that drives me crazy is people using the passive. So the passive is when you put the subject at the end of the sentence. So this research was undertaken, and we're all left going, okay, yeah, we kind of guessed that, but who undertook it? Because there's no subject. You know, the findings are discussed. Yeah, well, it's just not an engaging way of writing. So for those of you who know Ralph is my husband and he teaches business writing, and actually we've got something to learn from him because he teaches it, he has this idea of SIDAT. It doesn't mean anything except it's the start of these ideas. But it's a useful way for us to, as you see, I've got up there, sometimes academic writing is dull, incomprehensible and waffly. So we have got some lessons to learn. And by simple, the first of his SIDAPs, he means avoid those complex run-on sentences, that esoteric jargon that most people don't understand, and acronyms. Oh, acronyms. How many times have you read a piece where someone introduces an acronym and then 2 pages later you can't remember what it is? If it's only 2 words, and instead of using, you know, some are well known like IT, but I saw one where someone was using a parental participation and they used PP. Hey, it's only 2 words. Use parental participation. I kept reading all this and the PPs at the PTA and it's like, oh, for goodness sakes, just put the words in. So make it easy for your reader. So it doesn't mean simple means dumb it down. It just means a few shorter, crisper sentences, a good structure. If the jargon is something that most readers of that journal wouldn't know, explain it or use a better word. Utilise. Why would you use utilise when use means exactly the same thing? You use it because it sounds fancy, but actually there are simpler ways of saying very complex ideas. He uses informal, but I say less formal. You want to include, you want your writing to be invitational and inclusive. And if it is okay in that journal or that piece of writing to use the first person, that's good. But that really stuffy, formal, push you away kind of writing, you don't see it as much anymore, but I think that emerging scholars think they have to write that way because it's academic. Well, if you've read my writing, I don't write that way and I get published. It's because I do all that other stuff. It's structured, it's clear, it's got a point and so on. That's what's more important. I have something to say. Direct, get to the point. If I haven't told you anything else, then I've told you about get to the point. Let us know up front what it's about. Get to be able to judge what's useful background and what's just extraneous detail. I've mentioned the passive, so I would rather know, I don't care if you call yourself the researcher, but the researcher undertook 6 qualitative interviews is better than qualitative interviews were undertaken. I'm just left going, by whom? By you, by your research assistant? It just makes it easier. And if you can, change your tense as well. So if you're talking about, you know, a survey has been done, isn't it? What about rethinking about it and thinking either of using a past tense that's more active, or even using the present tense. So I often find if I want to really engage my reader, I might use the present tense, and I might talk about the research in a way that seems as if it's almost happening right now, and then people get hooked in. Now you have to be a good writer to be able to do that, but just think about not being quite so stuffy, formal, dull, incomprehensible. And the last one is personal. Connect to the people you're writing about. So if you're writing for teachers, make it seem as if you're talking to teachers. Or if you're writing for educational leaders, those are the people you're talking to. Make it seem as if you know who they are and you could connect to them in some way. Okay, very last rule, make it easy for editors and reviewers, because this is what gets you published. You've got to have something to say. It's got to be new. You need to show that you know the field. And if you're working across fields, you need to show that. It's got to be current. Well, I mean, it can be an historical journal, but therefore it needs to be a current take on that issue. And it needs to be at least, if not provocative in itself, then it needs to have us stop and think about the issue in a new way. Your evidence, your research findings get us thinking about something in a new way. If I read your article and go, so what? Then you haven't grabbed me. You haven't done that relevance, significance, what's the problem, etc. Bring a new insight. That's what editors want. That's what reviewers will be asked to look for. What does this add to our field? And of course, it's got to be well written, got to be well argued, and it's got to fit the journal. Now, they have quite a bit more that I won't go into today because you can get the notes. But Kenway and co, I still think this is really useful. Is your paper theoretically adequate? Is it methodologically adequate? Is it analytically adequate? And is it stylistically adequate? And then they've got a whole lot of descriptors down there for you to think your way through. So that's a nice little checklist for your going. Now, it doesn't have to be in that order, but that's what they want to know. That somehow there's a theoretical, conceptual framework that holds us together. Somehow we can trust your methodology. Somehow we know how you made sense of your data. And yes, you did deal with the referencing, the grammar, the punctuation, etc. Okay, nice little checklist for you. So we're nearly there. Getting your work out there, part 6. So I think we're about the second last slide for those of you who have to go. So this is Auntie Carol's guide, much the same as Kenway, but a little bit more. Have something worthwhile to say. What is the point you want to make? And then you have to have an angle because, you know, out of your thesis, you had so much to say, but you have to have an angle or a focus that suits that audience or that journal. So you may have to reshape some of your major findings to kind of tailor them, especially if you're answering a call for a special issue or a book where they're wanting a particular take on it. And so that one about qualitative research, they weren't so interested in your findings. They wanted to know how you use qualitative research to get to those findings. So you have to follow their angle. Don't try to do or say too much in one piece. And I've already told you, save it. Save your bits and you can have them in multiple places. But sometimes the detail is overwhelming and a reader or an editor is just going to go, oh, they're over the word limit. They're all over the place. They've said too much. I just lost the thread of the piece. A few key ideas well written is far better than a whole lot of extraneous detail. Pick your journal and then write to it. So follow the journal and publisher guidelines, which includes getting your referencing convention right. I've told you again, if you write collaboratively, someone at the end has to smooth it out into a nice seamless voice. And the only way to get published is be brave. Respond to that call. They can only say no. If you've got a good idea, contact an editor and say, you know, I've just finished a thesis on whatever and I wondered if this particular angle would be of use to you. They can only say no, but somebody else might say yes. And I've mentioned also about practicing your writing, so get known. Write those smaller pieces. Write something for the PPTA journal or the, you know, the Samoan Times or whatever that's about your research, because it helps you narrow it down, shape it up, have a focus, use those topic sentences and so on to capture the reader, make it relevant, and just get it out there. Don't hoard it, don't worry about it, don't sit on it. Remember, you've got 5 pieces going now, bang, get that one out. Bang, get the next one out. Okay, if you only get a hit rate of 2 out of 5, that was better than you sitting on the 2 and being not brave enough to send them out. And build what I call writing resilience. Once I let a piece go, I let it go. So once I've sent it out there, I don't agonise over how I could have done it better or whatever. And yes, I get bad reviews as well, so they come back. But I just go, you're having a bad day, aren't you? So I don't see it as me, but I embrace the feedback. I go, okay, if I really want it published in this journal, then this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to either change it or I'm going to write very clearly to the editor and say, you know, I thank editor 2 for their helpful advice. However, if I follow their advice, it will be a different piece. So therefore, I'm not going to do this part, but I'm happy to do this part. So I take charge of it. I learn from it. Yeah. And see writing as an everyday part of what you do. Remember, don't do that agonising. Just write. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I don't even send perfect pieces out for publishing. They're kind of 90% good enough because I know that the reviewers are going to send back these things that I have to fix up. So if I just, rather than miss a deadline, I'll get it as good as it can be for the time that I have, using all the guidelines I've given you. So it's got structure and it's got a focus and, you know, it's got evidence and it's clear and it's easy to follow. So I know it's going to be pretty good anyway, but I don't go back and tidy up every tiny little point. Yep, so I'm missing a reference here and a reference there. That's fine. The reviewers are going to tell me that. And sometimes, don't tell editors this, but I'm sometimes a bit over the word limit. But I always think if I write a good enough piece, you know, they never notice. But it has to be a really good piece. So I've had times when the reviewers have said, the piece is a little long, but the editor's just gone, nah, I want this piece. It's so well written, it's so well argued, it shines a light on something new, and they publish it, even though it's a bit longer than it usually is. But that's because of years and years of kind of honing my craft. And I think we're nearly there. This is what it was all about. Don't waste your hard work. Make the best of what you already have. Give them, funders, editors, reviewers, what they want. If they have a structure, use it. If not, create your own. Make it easy for them to find what they want. Give them the headings. Turn their criteria into questions. Make it easy for yourself. Do that plan. Stick to it. Make it easy for your reader. Topic sentences, structure. a much more engaging way of writing, and make it easy for editors and reviewers, because they'll be looking for clarity and they'll be looking for structure, and you'll get yourselves published. So back to Aorangi, the sky piercer, and a little whakatauki for you. Whaia te iti kahurangi ki te tuaho koe, mehe maunga teitei. So if you must bow your head, it must be to the tallest mountain. In other words, you know, little mountains don't count, little hills, little stumbles along the way. The only time that you do put your head down and say, I can't do this, is when you're at the top of Aorangi or Mount Everest. But up until then, don't bow your head unless it's a really big mountain. Just climb over that hill and keep on going. Tēnā koutou, kia ora. And that's me, I'll escape, stop sharing.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mutch. This was, I think I could speak on behalf of everybody here saying how inspiring this was, and how I think we're all now very eager to get our fingers on the typewriter and get going. If you have some time, we could open it up for a few questions. If anybody would like,
yep.
Feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask some questions.
Please, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I might kick off with a question, if I may. Thank you so much, Carol, for that. That was amazing. I made so much notes. Quick question. So how do you know something is good enough, or you have an idea that is good enough to work on for publishing?
Well, run it past people. So, you know, you must have, well, you have a circle of friends, I know that already, but also you must have mentors or people who were your supervisors. I still have people that I have supervised come back to me and say, Carol, this chapter, you know, call for a chapter came out and here's what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think this will work? And I might say, yeah, looks great. Or I might say, well, strengthen it here or add a bit there, or I think you need to focus a bit more there. So just ask around, and that's the best way to get that help. And eventually you get to judge. You just get to know when an idea is good, and you know you've got everything to back it up. The literature, the theory, the conceptual framework. It's, you know, it's a new exciting topic for that field. You'll get a good feel for it.
I also put a link in the chat. I put many links in the chat, but one of them was about the benefits of becoming a reviewer. And I've done that a few times, you know, in the last few years, and I found that was also really helpful to understand again how people are receiving the writing. So that might be another suggestion.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, other questions? Feel free to introduce yourself as well when you ask a question.
Hi, Carol. I have a question, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I'm Ali. Ali, I'm from Melbourne, Australia. And I really appreciated all of your presentation. I have two questions, but I'll start with the one that's more pressing to give others a turn. I'll wait for the second one. I have recently completed an autoethnography that's due for publication. And something that my supervisors and I didn't discuss was authorship. And a week before it was going in, I thought I'd better raise it with them. And they do expect to be named on the publication, which is a little bit problematic. And not that I want to throw my supervisors under the bus, because they are amazing and they do deserve to have their names on the paper. So I'm not disputing that. But what's tricky about it is that it's written in first person, and that maybe I would have made different decisions, a little bit like what you were talking about earlier, that some things you could reserve for another paper, because it's now not my paper, it's mine and 3 other people. So do you have any kind of advice around managing this now, or, you know, ways in which I can approach my supervisors about how do we overcome that? I mean, is there like a little statement at the beginning that explains their role in the supervision of that paper?
You can do it 2 ways. One, it depends on the journal. You can do it as a footnote, Just to explain, because again, you're explaining to the reader that this article is, is a personal piece in autoethnography. However, because of the substantial support given by the other two authors, so we just get a sense of it. Either it can, usually the acknowledgements of people who didn't help you, who helped you but aren't named as authors. But really my advice is sort it out early on. Now I know that for busy academics, there are many supervisors now who just expect that they will be on their students' papers. And my personal rule is that unless I've actually written a bit of the paper that's going in, I don't deserve to have my name on. I'm paid to be a supervisor. But I do understand that in some institutions and in some disciplines, it's an expectation. So it's really important to sort it out at the start.
Yeah, thank you. That's true.
Now, if we don't have another question, we can go back to Ali's second question, but do we have another question?
Oh, I might ask a question if I may. Hi, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. Some great ideas. I'm Rachel from University of Auckland. My question is around, I know in your tips, you talk about getting to the point and being not overwriting too much and going down a rabbit hole or a tangent. I'm a terrible one for going down a rabbit hole and thinking, oh, I could add this, I could add this. Do you have any tips on how to balance that? Like wanting to get across a lot of ideas and evidence, and how to balance that with knowing that the evidence I presented is strong enough?
Well, part of what I've been leading you through, if you draw your little boxes and so on, and you think about your city, suburb, street, then and you limit, for example, you shouldn't have any, I would suggest, more than about 3 sub ideas that you're dealing with, and then maybe they only have 1 or 2 pieces of evidence each, and then what's left over goes somewhere else. As I say, the first piece you write from whatever you've been doing should be your masterpiece, if you like, the thing that you get known by, that you want to put in a good journal. But you can't, if it's even 7,000 words, you can't fit everything in. So think of what's the angle, what's my strongest point I've got to make that's going to suit that journal. And because you know that you're going to use the other thing somewhere else. And again, draw it all up, give it word numbers, and just stick to it, because you can't say everything. But it's surprising how when you look at your leftovers, you go, actually, that is a really interesting point. If I think a bit more about that and I flesh it out a bit, or I go back to my original data, that might be just as strong an article as the one I've just written. I know it's hard to let go, because you've spent 3 or 4 years of your life writing those 100,000 words, and it's like giving birth to a baby, and it would be like you'd never let your baby go, and you wouldn't chop your baby up into 5 different pieces either. But at least, as I say, think of that idea of that I have, which allows me to keep moving, which is once I've submitted something, it's gone. It has a life of its own, and I reclaim it back in different ways. So that thing that I did give birth to, it's kind of being given to the world, to the universe. I still own parts of it and so on, but I don't feel so tied to it has to be the way it was there, or all those really good ideas have to be in there, because I've let it go. So let your thesis go, or your wonderful piece of work. And I realise that you're at the University of Auckland, so feel free to wander down and have a chat to me anytime.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Carol, ko Peter Hudson tēnei, working out of the Faculty of Māori and Indigenous Studies at Waikato. A challenge I have as an Indigenous writer is sometimes my ontologies and epistemologies are in tension with the ontologies and epistemologies of the A1 journals. And when it comes down to rewriting publications, it changes the position in which I'm sitting. How are there suggestions of how to come around, or get around those positioning questions of epistemologies, ontology, positional statements?
I faced this question when I wrote with a Māori colleague, and we both put our pepeha at the start of the piece, and it came back saying, yeah, we don't need any of that sort of stuff at the front of that's not what the readers want to know. And I wrote a very strong and passionate piece, more to support my colleague, and said, how can you claim to be open to new ideas and new ways of seeing the world if you can't accept something in this form? And they wrote back and went, we're terribly sorry. We actually hadn't realised. And, you know, we now realise we've committed a cultural faux pas and we want to redress that. And we're going to put your paper first in the journal. So, yeah, just stick to your guns. Just keep arguing politely. But yeah, until people start to take notice. I always think that if you think in terms of Te Reo becoming mainstream, it's a long battle. But I now hear people just using phrases and words in everyday speech that I could never have imagined even 10 years ago. You just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and suddenly people don't even realise that they've moved on. So sorry that you have to be at the forefront, but just keep pushing and pushing. And there are journals out there that they might not be A-star journals, but they're certainly much more innovative, do have an Indigenous focus and so on. So as I say, I always think it's important to secure your career in a big journal, but then write for your audiences, for people who are going to love your work. Because actually you don't often get cited a lot in those big journals, but you do get cited when you write for a particular audience. So the piece I wrote for the School as a Community for the United States Journal has got like 96, it was a little community piece that's got like 96 citations. It's not one of my most exciting pieces. It's not really theoretically rich or any of that, but it hit the target audience and they keep citing it. So yeah, just there are other ways of playing the game, I think. Got it, thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Yvonne Wood from AUT, but I'm studying through Waikato. You've used a few really interesting metaphors to speak about things, and I'm wondering how to learn about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and how to manage those leftover ideas that when you're writing, you're so in it, but then in the editing process, you end up with something very lean, but a lot of that other stuff gets lost.
And in fact, the best advice I got when I was writing my PhD was I didn't want to take anything out. And someone said, well, what you do is you take out the section and you put it in the, sorry. Could someone turn off the sound, please? Great, okay, sorry, there was just a loud noise there. When I was writing my PhD, someone said, well, you know, don't throw it out, just put it in the appendices. And then I forgot about it and I wrote the rest of the thing, and then I went, oh, of course, it doesn't fit in the appendices. My thinking has moved on. I can let it go. Again, about letting it go. So, yeah. In fact, I just have files full of, you know, it might be the name of an article or called leftovers. And I take those really good ideas and I put them there. And sometimes they become a new piece in themselves, and other times they become a section of something else. I never think anything is lost. If I put time and energy into writing it and thinking about it, it will have a home. It might not be next year. It might not be the year after. It might be 10 years away before you go, you know, that didn't make a really nice comparative piece. And you go back and find it again. So you never say goodbye. Yep. It's like your little garden of flowers. You keep planting.
Well, I see a few people are having to leave, so
Yes,
before we
2 hours is a long time.
I just wanted to again thank Dr. Mutch for the wonderful workshop today. And just to let everybody know that, you know, this doesn't have to be the end of our conversation. We can certainly continue having these types of discussions as a community, supporting each other, perhaps finding ways to collaborate on publications, etc. We are going to have another event in May where 3 members of our community are going to present their research. So another opportunity to support each other, hear each other, get some helpful feedback. But any other ideas you have, feel free to reach out to us. And I'll leave it there. Thank you again. Carol, would you like any final comments?
No, thank you for staying absolutely to the bitter end. Yeah, I realise I do talk a lot, but I kind of want it here. I wasn't even using my own advice, which was, you know, keep it simple and don't overdo it. Just felt that I only had one chance with you, and I had to put it all in there. But it seems as if we managed to squash it in, and people have found something that they want to take away. So it's a pleasure to work with you, and I can only wish you all the best. So, kia ora koutou, and go well, everyone.
Aloha tu moana matikora. Hi, Carol. Stay lava.
Bye, News. Good to see you. Bye, Moana. She's gone. Oh, thank you so much again, Professor Carol. That was wonderful. Just the progression of the ideas and the guidance, really. It wasn't like a quick tip session. It was just very
structured,
very helpful to see the structure and thinking the thing through. So it really helps to break it down like that.
Yeah.
So yes, encouraged to go back and write.
Yeah, and it makes it not so scary. So that's the most important thing. You takes away some of those barriers. So thank you for the invitation, and take care, everyone. And
take care and have a good week.
Yeah, our paths will cross again.
Thank you. Bye, Carol.